Mint is still $15 a month for premium wireless. And if you haven't made the switch yet, here are 15 reasons why you should. 1, it's $15 a month. 2, seriously, it's $15 a month. 3, no big contracts. 4, I use it. 5, my mom uses it. Are you playing me off? That's what's happening, right? Okay, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, $15 per month equivalent required. New customer offer first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
A lot of the way people get news is now on platforms that are algorithmically driven to promote engagement. And we have to grapple with that and deal with that. But to me, like that kind of fair-mindedness, that kind of openness and honesty and respect for the reader's ability to process information and reach a conclusion is worth fighting for and is valuable.
This is Small Press, Big Ideas, a podcast about the business of local news in the United States. I'm your host, Paul Glortz. Small Press, Big Ideas is about the opportunities and challenges that local news publishers are facing for their businesses. I'll sit down and talk with journalists, entrepreneurs, nonprofit leaders, and more in the local news industry to find out what's working, what isn't, and how the local news ecosystem can innovate and flourish in the 21st century. Okay, today on the podcast, I am joined by Matthew Watkins. Matthew is the editor-in-chief of the Texas Tribune, a nonpartisan, nonprofit media organization that promotes civic engagement and discord on public policy, politics, government, and other matters of Texas statewide concern. You know, he's spent decades in Texas journalism, now leads the Tribune down there in Austin. So, yeah, I've been looking forward to this. And Matthew, thank you for coming on the show, man. I do appreciate you taking the time out of your day.
Yeah. Hi, Paul. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yes, thank you. So I did a very, very brief intro there, but I would love if you could just kind of give me some info on your background in journalism, your story in local and other journalism, and kind of how you came to your spot at the Tribune.
Yeah.
Your background. Yeah.
Absolutely. I grew up in Texas. I've lived in Texas my entire life. I went to Texas A&M University, and my first job out of school was at the local paper in Bryan College Station, where Texas A&M is housed, just covering, it was a very small paper covering everything, really, courts, city government, state politics, all those different types of things. And it was while I was working there that the Tribune came together when it was created around 15 years ago. I had growing up been a huge fan of Texas Monthly, the magazine there, which our co-founder Evan Smith was the editor of before he took over, or he co-created the Texas Tribune. And so, I had been noticing, it had been my goal. I wanted to get to Austin, where I grew up, wanted to cover state government, was bemoaning the fact that a lot of those jobs were disappearing. At the same time, Evan and his co-founders were sort of bemoaning the fact that coverage of the Capitol was disappearing. So they created this nonprofit built fully around the idea that, state government really touches people's lives in so many important ways. They decide, the funding that goes for your schools, the roads that you drive on, the healthcare you receive, all different types of methods that like you encounter every day, and people need to know more about it. And so my fandom of Texas Monthly and my kind of supporting of the mission caused me to reach out and basically try to convince them to hire me. And so I sent Evan and Ross and John, our other two founders, I think Facebook messages, basically being like, you don't know who I am, but you should really hire me. And the messages were good enough for me to get an interview with them, but not good enough to get a job. They basically said, get a little bit more experience, come back, we'll keep in touch. And so I did. I went to the Dallas Morning News after that. I covered local government there for a few years and was actually just getting ready to move to Austin for the Morning News to cover the state government there when got reached out to by the then editor-in-chief, Emily Ramshaw, offering me a job at the Tribune. Worked at the Tribune as a reporter for a couple of years and then kind of moved my way up through the ranks as an editor. Was our breaking news editor, our politics editor, our managing editor, and then a little bit over a year ago became editor-in-chief.
Wow, man, congrats. That's quite a path.
Yeah.
Could you also maybe double click on just dive into the Texas Tribune a little more? kind of, I just read off of the LinkedIn page what you cover, but could you just have it as an org, the size, business model, et cetera, what you cover, all that stuff? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Tribune is a nonprofit, is, considered, I think, one of the sort of pioneers of this sort of new era of nonprofit news, right? It was us, it was ProPublica, it was a few, Voice of San Diego, MinnPost were kind of some of those first that were really trying to take a look at the nonprofit model as a way to kind of address the kind of collapsing business model of newspapers at the time. So yeah, it was built largely on the idea of, like I said, declining coverage of the state capitol in Texas and a desire to focus solely on that, right? So what I like to say is we write for a general audience, but we're not a general interest publication, right? So we don't cover, Texas sports or Texas restaurants or food or anything like that. We only really write about those topics or any other topics if they have a kind of public policy or politics angle. We try to stay laser focused on that topic. So we're around 15 years old, I guess coming up on 16 years now, and, have grown significantly during that time. I think they had like 8 to 12 employees at the start. We're now closer to 80 or so employees. Our newsroom has around 45 people. We have spread out all across the state. We cover state government. We have a ton of reporters as I speak in the state capitol covering a very high stakes special legislative session. But we also have reporters based in Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, El Paso, Brownsville, Lubbock, Lufkin, Odessa, Washington, D.C. People, the real idea of you can't just tell the story of government and politics from where the decisions are happening, but you need to spread out across the state, talk about the issues that folks are, the issue that the lawmakers are trying to address, highlight the issues that maybe need their attention, and tell the story of the impact of government's lives on everyday people. And so that's what we do. Our business model is varied, right? So we rely on, individual donations. We get support from foundations that might want to, help support coverage of particular topics and, have discourse on those issues. And some organizations that are, looking to support journalism as a public good. And we also have sponsorships both on our site and our events. Those come from the fact that we very closely cover the Capitol. We have a very influential audience. And so, sponsors want to be able to pay to kind of access that audience. We have a small premium politics paid newsletter. And then I mentioned events. We make a good amount of money of events. We do events all across the state on the topics we cover. And we have an annual festival in the fall each year that brings people from all across the country, big prominent national politicians and things like that, where we sell sponsorships off those events. We also sell tickets, and that's a big source of revenue for the Tribune as well.
Yeah, they've been rising on my kind of radar lately. That's a good revenue mix though. And it kind of leads me naturally into one of the questions I had written down here is I just said that I know the Tribune is a nonprofit, which you brought up, and I know you worked at for-profit orgs also, Dallas Morning News, I'm assuming is,
yes.
And some other places. Can you give me your take, because everybody has a different take, on maybe the pros and cons of nonprofit versus for-profit in a current media landscape where it's difficult for everyone? I have people from both sides on the show, and I'm just curious if you have any thoughts there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the biggest positive is every dollar that comes in is spent supporting the journalism, right? The Tribune, unlike anywhere else I've ever worked, I mean, everywhere I've worked has a very strong, newsrooms, journalists generally have a strong sense of mission and view themselves as an essential part of democracy and everything like that. But I've never felt that like so much part of the culture and really like strongly believed in the focus of everyone, from the editors and the reporters to the chief financial officer to the people who are raising money. Everyone is so laser focused on the public good as opposed to maximizing shareholder value, and that allows you to do a lot of things that might be harder to do if you work for a for-profit company. I think to the extent that people ask questions about the nonprofit model, they question, how can you be an independent newsroom when you're relying on donations and things like that? It's a legitimate question. I understand the question. My answer is generally doing journalism takes money. It costs money, right? You have to pay the reporters, you have to pay for the travel, all those different things. And money will always carry the threat of influence, right? In my first job, I tell this story a lot. It was during I don't know if you remember a while back, Toyota was facing some heat because of this idea of accelerators getting stuck, and it was causing people to get into crashes.
I had a recall on my Tacoma for that exact thing a few years ago. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So there you go. And so this was a whole big thing. At my first paper, the Toyota dealer was the biggest sponsor, advertising buyer at the paper, right? And this dictate came down that every story, even an Associated Press story, needed to quote that dealer when we wrote about this Toyota thing in the newsroom. Like, we all refused to do it, and ended up the editor-in-chief would have to go sit in the dealer's office and get the quote for all those stories. But my point is there's the threat of someone providing revenue to your organization having undue influence no matter where you go. What's important is that you create the guardrails to prevent that, right? And so what we do at the Tribune is we are very careful about that in a lot of different ways. One way being, we try to really seek diversity in our funding sources, right? We don't want to have any one donor who's too big to anger, right? So if we were solely funded by one rich guy and he cared a whole lot about that issue, whether we wanted to or not, we would probably be a little bit influenced by what he was pushing for. But there's no one big donor at the Tribune. We get money from all over the place in all different places and all across the political spectrum, right? If you pick an issue, you can probably find on our donor list people on each side of that issue. And, what we hope is that the people that are giving us that money are doing it not because they want us to tell anyone how to think on a particular topic, but because they believe that, our democracy requires truthful, factual, nuanced information to help us understand and reach our own decisions. And then lastly, we practice radical transparency. So if you go to our website, you can scroll down to the bottom and see the Who Funds Us list. And it will give you a list of every single person who's given us money in the 15-year history of the Texas Tribune, from the $5 donors to the $1 million donors. And, the idea there is give people the information they need to make a decision about whether to trust us or not. And we think that if you look at the way we do our reporting, you see how we disclose our information, that you will build that trust. And so, I have been a really big fan of working in nonprofit news. I think it's been a great model. It's not a magic wand that solves everything. It's not like you go work for a nonprofit, you don't have to worry about money anymore. But I think it is a really good way to sort of center the value that journalism brings to society and put that at the forefront of what's driving you and the decisions that you make.
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. Start converting your B2B audience today. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started today at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
That was a great take. That's a great answer to that question. Because I said, I have for-profit people on nonprofit people. Actually, this episode from this week was a gentleman from the INN and so he has some great stuff too. But I love how you said you still have to make money. It's still there. But I love the way you framed that with the mission, and the Toyota story is also a great kind of example of the case study of how that influence does come in, even if you don't want it to.
Yeah,
it's just like everything, bias, influence. You don't want to have it. Everybody has it on some level.
Exactly.
Perfect. So you also said that, the radical transparency, like all your donors and everything. So kind of partially related, another question I had worked up here I wanted to ask you about was, I was wondering if you could tell me about, sorry, where's my question? I lost it on my notes here. I wonder if you could tell me about T squared, which is kind of the same audience. And FYI for the audience, at the top of kind of the page, it says it's an occasional series about the inner workings of the Texas Tribune. And I think it's an awesome idea for community engagement and transparency. I'd love if you could tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an effort to sort of peel back the curtain and tell people what we're doing, right? So we'll post hiring announcements, we'll post updates on what's coming from the Texas Tribune Festival or some new initiative we're trying out and everything like that. And I mean, I think the large part is we understand that the way people get their information and the way you build trust with people is starting to change, right? It used to be very institutional driven, right? Like it's like I am a NBC News watcher, or I read the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or whatever. And there are still definitely people who do that. And I think the brand of the Texas Tribune is very valuable in Texas. But I think particularly with younger people, they want to know who the humans are behind these efforts, right? And the T squared is part of that, like telling you who's producing this news, who's giving you the information. You can click on the bios of the reporters and other people on staff too. But it's, we even do that with we're trying to increase our amount of social video and things where our reporters are talking directly to the camera, or podcasts like this, right? The more that you see who we are, and it's less of a caricature of a journalist based on, what maybe politicians or movies or whatever might portray journalists as, and more see us as like real people out there in the community, doing what we're doing. I think the more likely you are to build trust with your audience.
Yeah, that's great. Everything I've been reading and lately is just about the value of the community, and I feel like it's kind of sinking into my thick skull lately how important that is, of connecting like that when there is a overabundance of content that people can pick and choose out there. If you get
it's interesting because I feel like I was very much trained to not make myself the story, right?
Right.
Your byline is in the paper, but like this isn't about you. And in some ways, I have to sort of try to fight back against that instinct because that's sort of what feels natural to me. But I do think there's just a lot of people now who want to know like who's behind the work.
Yeah. Yep. That makes sense. So that also kind of, you were talking about brand and how there used to be, I'm a Wall Street Journal reader, I'm X, all this. So you guys are a stated nonpartisan organization in a particularly polarized time, in a particularly complicated, polarized state. From I'm an outsider, I'm in Colorado, I don't know, but I see things coming out of there.
Yeah, it's an accurate description.
Yeah, I saw I believe some members of a certain party actually fled the state recently I don't really know the mechanics behind it or anything. Anyway, not important. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on navigating that when people are hyper polarized and really probably want you to take sides, or if you don't agree with what they say, think you're the other. Any thoughts on that? Walking that line in our current time these days.
Yeah. I mean, I think we firmly believe in our nonpartisan mission, and I think there's a few different reasons for that. I think first of all, because we believe that, or we want to reach as many people as possible, right? And we know that if you take a certain position, especially in this climate, you are likely to completely shut down a segment of the group that's whether they want to listen to you or not. Second of all, like I personally am a big believer just in my own practice and just in our like broader democratic theory, small d democratic, that people need reliable information that's not designed to manipulate you, but is designed to just give you the information you need to make a decision. And what I say to our reporters, our staff a lot is like, you may think our governor, Greg Abbott, is the best guy in the world, or you may think he is an appalling, terrible person. But if you're going to be like an active and productive participant in our society, you need to understand him for who he is and not a caricature of what people want you to think about him, right? Because if you only view him as a caricature, even if you're on the opposite side with him, you're not going to be able to influence him. You're not going to be able to affect change. You're not going to be able to accomplish what you actually want to accomplish. And I think there's this idea of like generating outrage or, creating an emotional response from people really drives engagement. And so, a lot of our communication, a lot of the way people get news is now on platforms that are algorithmically driven to promote engagement. And we have to grapple with that and deal with that. But to me, like that kind of fair-mindedness, that kind of openness and honesty and respect for the reader's ability to process information and reach a conclusion is worth fighting for, and it is valuable. There are a couple of things that I will acknowledge about that, which is everyone brings their own perspective to a story, right? And I'm not going to pretend that we are this like voice of God that is just telling you everything you need to know, right? Like our own conscious and unconscious biases are driving, the decisions about what stories to write and everything like that. And so that's why you want diversity in a newsroom, like all kinds of diversity, economic, racial, diversity of thought, all that type of stuff. So hopefully that's kind of balancing it out. But also just like, I want you, if you're a reporter who works for me, to be as open-minded as possible, to be as curious as possible, and really trying to seek to understand and portray honestly where people are coming from, and not judge them from the beginning with the statement, and then sometimes we're still going to be attacked as being too, on one side or the other. And there's a lot of incentive for people to do that, both in politics and outside of politics. And again, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about with the funding, right? Like read us and draw your own conclusions. And if you do that, that's fine with me.
That's great. I think there's some great lessons in there. It's funny, another guest on this podcast, my friend John Garrett at Community Impact, also in Austin, I think, or at least in Texas.
Yeah.
Must be something in the water down there. When I asked him how, because he has a crazy brand, people love his Community Impact.
Yeah.
And one of the things he's like, I don't want people to know like what side we're on or what I think about this. So it really kind of dovetails with what you kind of said there. It's very important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Any thoughts? I'm getting tired of asking this question because it's beaten like a dead horse lately, but I have to ask it because I'm interested. Any thoughts on implementing AI at the Tribune? Like I said, it's everywhere, but people are doing really interesting stuff with it too. So I'm curious how your newsroom is kind of integrating it or how you think about it. I think there's even a piece on the T-Squared, how we're using AI, but I'd love to hear your take on it too.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few different ways we have used it. We have used it to create AI-generated audio of our stories. So at the top of every story page, you can, have an AI voice read it to you. And that was largely done out of an accessibility effort, right? I mean, there are some people who can't read. Maybe they're visually impaired or for whatever reason, and we want them to be able to access our content too. We also just understand that there's a lot of people who are maybe less interested in reading news and more interested in listening to it on their headphones and other methods as well. And so that's why we did that. We've also experimented a couple times with kind of feeding our stories into AI bots. So one of the big issues in our past legislative session was this effort to implement school vouchers, using taxpayer funding to pay for private school tuition for some parents. We've written a ton about this over the years because it's been a big hot button issue in Texas. Just thing we tried was we fed it into a LLM and allowed people to ask questions and then answer. We were very strict in the way we trained the LLM so that if it didn't know the answer, it wouldn't make an answer up. It would tell you, we don't know. And it actually created this interesting situation where it would tell them they don't know, and then it would send us the question that they asked. And so it ended up being a really interesting engagement tool because we were then getting fed what our readers wanted to know about this topic that we hadn't covered yet, which then led us to write some stories to try to answer those questions. So that was a pretty cool little thing. But we're trying to be very careful. We're trying to uphold certain standards, right? We're not going to generate AI images, for news stories. We're going to rely on photography. Anytime we use AI, whether it's for the bot or for, the AI audio or anything like that, we're going to disclose that we're using it. So no one's thinking like, oh, this person from the Texas Tribune is reading this story, when in reality it's a, robot or whatever. I think none of it has like significantly moved the needle for us where it's like, changing our business model or changing the main way people get our news, but I think we just really want to be trying to experiment and see how it's useful and what we can do. I mean, our reporters use it too for like AI transcription, and various other tools like that, but we want to be fluent in it for whatever direction, this technology is going to take us next.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's such a powerful tool and it's so easily to fall down specifically with journalism, to slide down a slope where it's like, oh wait, what just happened? What did we just put out to the audience and everything? I was on a call with a mentor of mine earlier, just before this call, and he's a genius. He's retired. He always has 15 projects he's working on whenever I talk to him. And the two things I took away from him over some projects he's building is, just if it helps you in your personal life or the Tribune, is meta prompting. So basically, you ask the LLM how to prompt it. It's like one extra step. And be like, literally, how do you want it? And that makes a huge difference. And then literally, especially with journalism, just add at the end of your prompt, ask any questions if you don't know instead of making stuff up. It sounds so simple, but it really it'll give you like 3 or 4 clarifications. Because otherwise they'll hallucinate all over the place and just make things up. It's crazy. But anyway,
it's good.
Yeah. It's really simple stuff. But it's shocking. I've started doing that when it's shocking how much it's improved it. You still have to check it. It's still a crazy robot in many circumstances.
Right.
Excellent. Well, we have gotten through everything I had. This was awesome. I touched on everything I wanted to see. I would love if you have anything else you'd like to promote for the Tribune, where people should find you and the Tribune online, anything you want to promote or talk about. I'd love to hear that. And I can link to all of it in the show notes as well.
Yeah, well, what I would say is sign up for our newsletter. Our daily newsletter is called The Brief. If you're a Texas resident, sign up for that and you'll get a digest of what's going on in the state each day. If you're not in Texas but interested in what's going on, we also have a weekly newsletter as well, The Brief Weekly. If you go to our site, our homepage, texastribune.org, you can find that. There's a little newsletters tab. And then, one of the key ways that we raise money that I forgot to mention is members, right? So we have large dollar donors. We also have small dollar donors. So if you believe in the mission and like what we're doing, go to texastribune.org and help support that work.
Excellent. Yeah, and I'll link to all that. So if anybody's listening, you can just scroll down in your podcast player and click from there and find all that stuff. Awesome. Well, Matthew, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. It was fun.
Yep, thanks. All right, have a good day.
Thank you for listening to Small Press Big Ideas. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to help the show, the best thing you can do is to tell a friend or colleague and just take a few minutes to leave a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to right now. It only takes a minute out of your day, but it really does help the podcast grow and reach more ears. Check back for new episodes every Monday.